I was working for two incredible entrepreneurs. They were former Kraft General Foods people. They told me, he said to me, Steve, as long as you have a job here, as long as I have a job here, you'll have a job here. And I got called into the office that following Monday, and he said, we need to let you go.
Hey there, friend. This is Stephanie Crevens, and you are listening to the Mid-Level Leaders Hot Mess Hotline, where we bring on executives to share their war stories, the things they had to learn the hard way during their career, so that you, as an ambitious learner who wants to one day be in that C-suite, you don't have to learn the hard way either. So today's guest is Steve Spiro. And we're going to walk through an experience that he had as part of the 2001 recession and also in the aftermath of 9/11. You'll hear the details here in a minute, but he lost his identity. And we're going to talk through how he got it back. And I thought it was so important to share his story with you because, like me, I know you've probably been in his shoes at some point too, and needed guidance and support and help to get out of it. And so I hope that this episode does that for you if you're in that place, does it for you if you're in that place in the future, or you have someone in your life currently that's kind of down in the dumps, not knowing how to move forward with their life and career because they've lost their identity, because they've lost their job. I hope you'll share this episode with them. So 2001, friends, 21 years ago. I don't even comprehend that because I feel like the early 2000s was just 10 years ago. That is not true anymore. Steve has had a long, successful career since this upcoming story that he's going to tell us about when he got fired. And he started, to get started with Steve's career, he started his first company right out of college in advertising. He also has gone on to achieve the 4th degree black belt in karate and 1st degree in jiu-jitsu, including having his own karate studio. So if you need a bodyguard, I feel like Steve is our man. Like he could do some things, but I'm sure he only uses the force for good. Steve contributes much of his success to a strong work ethic, a can-do, never quit attitude, which you're going to hear about today, discipline, integrity, and fearlessness that he has cultivated because of his martial arts experience. And he brings that into his personal and professional life. Currently he calls himself the Master Connector on LinkedIn. He has over 35,000 contacts. He does a LinkedIn live broadcast every week called the Master Connector Show. And, as you'll hear in this story, his career has pivoted from advertising to technology, and now is a business automation consultant. And he is a devotee of self-development, having a mentor and inspiring other people to get out of their comfort zone too. And so he is bringing that work to this world currently, as well as a coach, as a mentor, and through his speaking. So let us hear about Steve's experience in 2001 when one day he just lost his identity. Let's go. All right. Hey, Steve, tell us about your hot mess, sir.
Absolutely. Well, I should give you a little context about who I am, and then we can kind of go from there because it'll set up a little bit about where I was when this hot mess happened, right?
Okay.
Born and raised in the Bronx. My dad was an entrepreneur. He owned a liquor store. Wound up, dissuaded me from going into that. So wound up going into advertising marketing. Went to high school for that, college for that. Got out, couldn't get a job, start a company, and had a really great run. We had an office in New York City in Midtown. It was awesome being a 22-year-old businessman. If you've ever seen the show Mad Men, that was kind of it was the tail end of that era. It was an awesome experience. but after about 6 or so years, we decided to close our doors and wound up, kind of transitioning into the marketing world, out of the advertising to the marketing world, worked for a company called, I'm not going to name the company, but a really big marketing agency working on some really big brands. I traveled, I was working with celebrities. It was really amazing. And I think I was pretty much settled in. We're talking right around 2000, right? 2000, coming to the 2001, and kind of feeling a little complacent, a little good. I felt good what I was doing, but And then one
a little
day,
too comfy, maybe. Like you're
probably a
like,
little bit too comfy, a little
yeah,
comfy. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. And then one day it was on, I think it was Monday, going to the office, and then there's a buzz, and then we get, people say, come into the conference room, and we see this spectacle happening. And that was the planes being, flown into the towers. 9/11 had hit.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. And, I still remember the feeling to this day. And it was like, what? I mean, is this a mistake? And
it was a scene out of a movie. It was so surreal. You're like, no, this
so
doesn't
surreal.
happen. Yeah.
So surreal. Yeah.
And just curious, like, where was your office? Was your office still in Manhattan? And where?
Greenwich, Connecticut.
Greenwich. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We were Greenwich. The original company, we were based out of Armonk, New York, and then it was Westchester, and then we wound up moving to Greenwich.
Okay.
And so it was just surreal. And then that whole week was kind of a blur. And then the Monday thereafter, I get called, and mind you, this was, and I appreciate them. I was working for two incredible entrepreneurs. They were former Kraft General Foods people. They told me, he said to me, Steve, as long as you have a job here, as long as I have a job here, you'll have a job here. And I got called into the office that following Monday, and he said, we need to let you go. And I found out later on that actually was happening before 9/11 hit. It just happened. He just decided to not do it on the day of 9/11. Probably not a bad move. That was a sensitive move, right? But he did a week later, which again, I get. Here I was making a big salary, big executive, and what the heck am I going to do with my life? And prior to that, I had been looking around. I had been, looking for positions, similar positions. The next level of that, I was an associate creative director. It was great. But I was, the next level for me was maybe, full creative director. And, I was like, but there was limited amount of positions, and the agency life is a crazy life. If you know anything about it, the hours are unpredictable. A lot of times, you can get a call on a Friday at 4:00 in the afternoon from a client. I need this on Monday morning. And it's like, okay, that's the end of that weekend. Doesn't matter what plans, done. And I just didn't want to have to live that life anymore. So I had to reevaluate. But that was the hot mess that I walked into a week after 9/11.
Yeah. Help me understand your feelings in the moment that you're being let go, because in my mind, I go to, well, isn't that a violation of trust? Like that guy said, basically you'd be there for forever, and then you weren't. And he shouldn't have said that as an employer, right? Like, but he did. Like, how did you feel that day?
I was pretty shocked. I definitely felt some animosity a little bit, you said that you went back on your word. To be fair, when he made that statement, he was an owner. Then he became an employee because he got bought out by the larger company that bought him out. Now he was an employee, but still, you're right. From an HR standpoint, probably not a good statement to make. Right. And he said, listen, it was pure numbers and this and that. And I felt betrayed a little bit. I definitely felt lost. In fact, the first person I called, my wife doesn't like to, when we relive this, but was my mentor, not my wife.
Yeah.
Okay, what am I going to do now? Like, what the heck am I doing now? So, but she was the second call, obviously. But it was crazy. It was shock. It was like, let down, and kind of like, what now? Kind of a feeling like my identity was gone, if you will.
Oh, yes. Losing your identity. Oh, that's a big one. I've been there. I lost my identity when I had a job eliminated. And I remember the distinct feeling of that first Monday sitting at my laptop and the emails weren't rolling in because I wasn't needed. Oh,
yeah.
It hurts. It broke my heart.
It did. It did. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what were those next days and weeks like after losing your job?
Well, I'm always been a guy of action. So I knew I needed to take action. And I had been hearing some rumblings. The group of people that I associate with, several people I had known had transitioned out of other careers into sales, into business to business sales. So I started putting my resume out there, and I don't know if there was Indeed back then. I don't think there was in 2001, 2002.
Wasn't it Monster?
It was Monster back
Yeah.
then. I don't even know Monster's around anymore. You're right. It was
Really?
probably Monster.
Yeah.
And it was traditional, right? The traditional way of, pounding the pavement, so to speak. And yeah, I went into mode, and I was trying to figure out. And so I said, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. I will say this: thank heavens for mentorship, and the gentleman that I think I've mentioned to you that he's private, so I don't like to give his name out, but he's been amazing. And what happened was literally about a year and a half to 2 years before this whole thing happened, we had a pretty big house in Westchester, big mortgage, big lifestyle, and he knew that he'd asked me, like, have you ever thought about selling your house? And I wound up, maybe thinking about, because it's a big house, there's only the two of us. He said, maybe we'll think about it. So it took us about a year and a half before we got an offer. But his advice was, at the time, look for a rental, something you rent as low as possible. He said, if you have to, get a basement studio or something, like really low, like which ego wise was like, that was not what I wanted to hear, but so to speak. But I trusted him. And, of course, there's a cool building in Portchester, New York called the Lifesaver Building. It's a really cool building. It was a converted factory, these loft apartments, really cool. The first one we went to see, and it's like, I said, hey, let me tell you about, and he's like, just keep looking. And so every time I saw these and they were expensive, of course, every time I came across something really cool, I'd call him. He's like, just keep looking. So I stopped asking him, because I knew he was going to say, keep looking. But eventually it took some time. We finally got an offer. It took forever. And we finally we had a closing date, and we still hadn't gotten a place, but we finally getting a place. And it was really, really a great deal, about a third of our mortgage. And we got the place, moved in. And then within 3 months of that happening, I get laid off. And so that's the foresight of that mentorship, right? I don't know how he knew, but somehow he knew. And that's happened a lot, where he just has wisdom, kind of like you just can't, it's hard to understand, but he did. And he also told me to put the money in a bank. Don't try to do something stupid with it. Take the equity and put it away. And so fortunately we had a bit of a cushion, and we had a much lower. And so it wasn't a total hot mess, but it was a hot mess psychologically. And so the other part of this story is, I said, okay, maybe now's a good time to reinvent myself and go into a whole nother industry. And, of all things, I wound up, after a bunch of interviews and searching and all this, I got into copier sales. And on the evolutionary scale below the chimpanzee and the orangutan is the copier salesman. So I figured if I could do that, I could do anything. And actually did very well at that, it was great. And it was a great foundational, because I was never trained classic sales. Now, when I had my advertising company, I was the guy who was smiling and dialing and making appointments. And I also was the guy who was collections. I had my clients paying net, believe it or not, net 15 and net 20. It was crazy how I was able to do that. But a young 20-something guy. But I was able to leverage, I guess, my experience. And I also had a couple of black belts, that about me as well. So I had the discipline and all that. And that was also, that helped me to some degree with my identity, because I still was able to, lean on that a little bit as far as who I was. But at the same time, I'm like, who am I now? Right. I used to be this, advertising executive guy, creative guy. And now I'm going to be slinging copiers, Yes. So it was crazy, but it actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because that whole thing really shook me up and wound up getting me out of my comfort zone and getting me on a path of self-development. And, he had kind of, started me on a path, but just before that of, books and audios and networking. And that started the networking journey, which, as you know, now they call me the master connector, right? Because, and that all started back then as I went from this sort of cushy creative guy, to now I'm a business development sales guy in just a different world.
Yes. Okay. We'll take a commercial break in a minute, but because I want to go to lessons learned. So I'm so ready to like tease those apart. But a couple questions before we go to commercial. One is just help us understand what was the time frame between losing your job and becoming a copier salesman?
It was right about 6 or 7 months.
6 or 7 months. Okay.
Yeah.
And that sounds right for that time. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what the job cycle was like in the early 2000s.
Sure.
Okay. And the reinvention part, who did you have to become a copier salesperson versus the Steve who was the creative guy, the creative director, the head honcho? Who was that Steve?
Yeah. I mean, I went from, wearing like, flowery, creative shirts to, having to wear a suit and a tie and, the white shirt. And I actually didn't like the white shirt thing. And so I wound up, deciding that I was going to do, different colored shirts and I wasn't going to be the white shirt, blue suit, white shirt, red tie guy, whatever. So I
it's
still
very
wanted to,
2000s.
yeah, I still wanted to maintain my, creativity. And I felt like I actually was able to keep a lot of it. And I used that creativity in a different way. My mom would ask me when I got out of that industry, she says like, don't you miss, creativity? I'm like, the creative stuff. I was like, no, I'm doing it in a different way. Right. The creativity of how to get in front of people and the creativity of a message. And when you put a proposal together, right, there's all sorts of other ways you can be creative. Right. So I was okay with that. So I wouldn't say I just completely changed who I was, but the focus was different for sure. And definitely I felt like I had to be this business development guy. And it really pushed me forward on the people skills side. I was very deficient in people skills back then. Starting to get a little better, at that point, but it's still very deficient. And so, being around people, sales, right? If you don't have good people skills, you're not gonna do well in sales. Let's be honest, right? I mean,
unless you're like an engineer salesperson or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
sorry, engineers.
Yeah, exactly. But I was not, so I needed to grow the people skills part and it was great. And also the relational part, right? Because people like to do business with people they know, like, and trust. So I had to grow in that area as well. And so it just was good for me because I knew I had a real reason. I knew those things. I should have been working on those things. But as we started, I was in that sort of complacent space. And now this pushed me and it really propelled me to move in areas of self-development I really needed to move into. And that's the result of that. And so I don't know if I'm answer your question, but that's kind of how the best way I could think about it.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. It's the universe, the Holy Spirit, whatever language folks want to use. I use both interchangeably, was calling you to something different.
Yeah.
And it was your boss who then propelled you to take action on that because he made you uncomfortable by taking away a safety net. And that's how all amazing life stories happen. Sure. Thank the good Lord up above. Yeah. All right, let's go to commercial break. We're going to come back and let's talk about how you have used those lessons since 2001 and what's been different for your life because of it. All right, well, we take a quick break from this amazing conversation today. I want to share with you a new tool that I have for you. I think that there's a myth in our workplaces. Well, let me say this. I know there's a myth in our workplaces that meetings have to suck, and I don't believe that whatsoever. By all accounts, our time in meetings have doubled, if not more, since the start of the pandemic. And this time with your colleagues should not be a waste of time. It should be the most valuable. So if you're looking for more resources to lead meetings that are productive, powerful, impactful, and have everyone participating, get over to my website at stephaniecrevens.com/lead kick-ass meetings and get some new tools so that when you leave a meeting with your colleagues, you're not left going, what the actual F was that? You're going, yes, we're going to take on the world together. Let's get this done, because it was an unbelievably powerful meeting. Those tools are out there for you, my friends, and they're on my website today, stephaniecrevens.com/lead kick-ass meetings. Now, let's get back into that conversation. So, Steve, what I heard from that example is a Steve who was getting a bit too comfortable, feeling complacent. And the day that you lost your job, you said, I felt lost. Like I didn't know who I was. But what I also heard in that journey of now having a title as a copier salesman was in some ways you discovered who you were, which was still disciplined, still action oriented, still creative. That's really who you are. It's not the title. How have you used those skills since then?
What I could tell you is that I'll just focus on the creative for a moment, right? There's been a lot of self-development, self-discovery that I went through over the last 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years, right? One of the things I discovered is that I'm learning disabled. I'm dyslexic.
Oh,
And yeah, and
okay.
because reading and test taking and all these things were not, it didn't work for me. So I've learned how to work around the challenges, the obstacles that I have. I think because of the learning disability, and I didn't realize it. I was doing it all along because I've
Mm-hmm.
had it since I was a kid. So I learned how to be, work around challenges with, my learning disability. Now I read Audible. I do Audible in terms of books, right? So back then we didn't have Audible, but
Right.
so creativity just became something that I just continue to leverage. I think one of the qualities or attributes that I've always had is a determined, never quit attitude, right? And
Mm.
I took that and I embraced that. So I guess to answer your question is I just took some of the positive qualities of what I had already and I just built on them. But I still went through life, through my career, through my transitions, and I've had definitely some transitions. If anyone goes to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see a lot of moves. But the one thing that I started to realize that was a barrier, and this took to just recently, that I was always protective of the vulnerability. And before we went live, we were sort of talking about that a little bit. The
Mm.
vulnerability about myself and
Mm.
this I always felt like this kid that was insecure and this kid that was never good enough and this kid that was bullied and picked on and never good enough, right? And all these things. And, I played the compare game with a lot of people in my own mind, right? Oh man, I'll never be that. I never be that. And the more recent change through this whole process for me has been to become okay with who I am and to accept who I am. And
Yes.
I did a post today about that, right? It's just like, you don't have to worry about. And once I felt that I'm good enough, I mean, I'm still always going to grow and become better, but I'm good enough. I'm okay. Then I said, okay, now I could actually really connect with people. And
Mm.
that's when really things changed. I think I definitely did well enough in my career, from that transition over for sure. And then I obviously did some other things. I got involved in some other entrepreneurial projects, but I've always done well. But the challenge was I did well to a degree. And then it wasn't until again, where I was able to figure out, that I'm good enough. I like to lead with that weakness. I like to lead with that vulnerability. I don't mind telling people, the bad parts, if you will, the challenges that I've had over the years. And I feel like, in that weakness, I have strength. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So basically, yeah. So that I don't know. Again, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's the best way I can answer it right now.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's learning to be vulnerable. That's certainly been my journey over the past 2 years. As a person, I armor up, right? I armor up around other people. I armor up when things piss me off. Like that's my go to. So that really resonates with me to be able to admit that I'm not perfect all the time. I have time blindness, which is actually a symptom of ADHD. I'm not sure I have ADHD, but I have some tendencies for sure. But I have time blindness. I literally can't figure out how long things will take. Like just before you and I got on, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry I'm late, Steve. I lost track of time because I was digging into something. Like that's
Yeah.
how my brain is. And that can be an asset sometimes. It can be disrespectful to folks at times. But at the end of the day, like finding a coping mechanism around
Yeah.
it, like that's all you got to do. It's just find a coping mechanism around it. And I love that you applied the lens of creativity to it, because chances are the things that have made you the most successful that you were doing so intuitively, you didn't even know you were doing them, are
Yeah.
the things that truly make you you, that will enable you to connect with people. It's just, it's
Yeah.
the best of all the good stuff right there. And I love the way you said it, because of when I became okay with who I am, I can finally connect with people. That's
Yeah.
vulnerability. That's letting the stuff down. Like, you
Sure.
can't connect with people if you have a shield over your
That's
heart,
right.
because they can't get to it.
That's
And
exactly
so
it. That's exactly what
beautiful.
happened. Yeah. Yeah. And, again, I've got a mentor in my life, and he would always say, he said, there's something about you that's kind of, just, there's a wall. He
Mhm.
couldn't put a finger to it. And that's all it was being able to just be able to let go of that. Right. The post today was about getting light and get rid of the baggage. And I just had to get light and get rid of the baggage and just like let it go. And like what in Frozen, right? Let it go, right?
Yes.
I'm not going to break out in a song. You'll be lucky
Oh,
about that.
come on, come on, come on,
Oh,
please.
not me.
I one time did karaoke with a guest. And it was real bad because I'm a real bad singer, but it's still hilarious. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
I like to make fun of myself. Oh my God. Okay. So I just had a question. It totally escaped me, because then I started thinking about us singing, which would make
I
me
took us
laugh.
off on a weird tangent with Frozen,
I live for tangents. Are you kidding me? That is my brain. No, that's good. I know you've been very successful. Here's one question that's coming to mind for me. And it comes from, I encourage all of my clients to have their FU money saved up. And FU money you can have at any income level. And all that is basically 6 to 12 months of savings, so that if anything happens in your job, you can still feed your family, keep a roof over your home, keep transportation, which here in Indianapolis you need, because our public transportation system sucks. Um, you can still do those things, and it doesn't add that kind of stress to your life that running out of money does. And a lot of successful mid-level leaders, the bigger the paycheck, the bigger the mortgage, the nicer the car, the bigger the debt. I mean, they just spend it as fast as it comes in for perception's sake. What do you know now about what that big house could never provide you, that a life of vulnerability and this kind of Steve now provides you?
Sure. Yeah, no, and today we're completely debt free, and we don't, and I know people say throw that around, but they have a mortgage payment, car payments. We don't have any of that, and we have
Yep.
money in the bank, and I'm very blessed to say that. But things I've learned is things are not your identity, I mean, and I found that really people are more important than mostly anything. And
Yes.
most important to me is legacy. And legacy, what I've learned is mentorship, and the impact you have on other people. That is the biggest legacy you have. So I'm, as I've gotten a little older, a little bit more wiser, it's less about things. It's more about people. It's more about, the impact you're having in this world with people. And that's really much more important. But what good, here's the one point, right? What good is a really big house if no one shares the house with you? What good is a really beautiful yacht if no one's on the yacht with you? So it's always about people. It's not about, things. So, I mean, we live in a nice place. We live on the water. It's great. I mean, I love the fact that we're by the water. We could be in a shack facing the water and I'd be happy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just love the water. It's just, it's healing for me, But other than that, no, I've learned, but I was never super materialistic. When I say a big house, it wasn't a mansion. Okay. Just full disclosure. It was a 3-bedroom house. It was just me and my wife. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So bigger than we needed. Right. I mean, you didn't
Yeah.
need a 3-bedroom house, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's my perspective on that.
Yeah. No, totally get it. I agree. I'm like you. My husband and I were debt free, and we're big savers. He's a bigger saver than I am. I'm grateful he teaches me a lot, but I do kind of have a weak spot for fast, pretty cars, and so I want a new car every 3 years. But you know, Everything else is all set up. So I try to walk most of the talk, but I do like a new car every 3 days.
What's the next new car? Do you have one in mind?
Yeah, it's going to be electric. I got a glimpse of that BMW iX, which is
Ooh,
beautiful. There's
yeah.
the Audi SUV version of the e-tron. There's a Polestar, which is a version. It's a brand that's an offshoot of Volvo. It's really a Volvo, but it's just sold differently.
Wow.
So yeah, got a couple different options.
You're not in the Elon Musk family, huh?
No, actually, Teslas, they are beautiful, but when you look at their quality ratings, they're pretty shitty.
Hey.
Yeah, like the way the interior is made. And so not a fan. But yeah, it's got cool tech, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
it's the other quality stuff, which I'm not sure I really need to worry about because I will keep it for 3 years, given my track record. But yeah, I'm really contrary. And so if something's popular, I automatically don't want it.
Right.
Yeah, not the best part of my personality, but that's how my brain works. So yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions and we'll let you get back to leaving your legacy, connecting with people and bringing the vulnerability to the world. What do you wish you could tell that version of Steve back in 2000 and today's version of the mid-level leader about what it takes to really be successful in life and in your career?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of relates to what we were talking about a little bit, and that is, I wish I could say, number one, you're okay. You need to just be okay with who you are, and you're good enough. Um, I will say this, be a little vulnerable. I don't think we have to cut this, but my sister was seeing a therapist, and she raved about him. You know, former minister, just a good guy, and I read a book. It was actually a book called Wallet Heart, and it just sparked me. And I said I need to have a man that I could talk to, somebody else besides the gentleman who's my mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and basically what he said to me was, Steve, you're okay. And I needed a validation. So maybe if my older self from the future came back and spoke to that and told my younger self that I was okay, maybe that would be enough to let me know I was okay.
Yeah.
But to number one, know that I'm okay. Number two, know that everything is going to be okay, and that if you just be vulnerable and look and get over yourself and just now be able to focus on others, things will be a lot easier, a lot better, and you'll thrive a lot more effectively. I think I was so protected. Like you said, the shield was up for me. I had the shield up, and I was so worried about me that I wasn't, others focused. And so what I would say is, be others focused, be a go-giver. I love the Bob Berg in his book, the go-giver, and the whole series, right? Go-giver leader, and a lot of great books there. But be others focused. And because if you are others focused, right, the law of reciprocity, the law of sowing and reaping, you give, eventually you get. And as the good book says, right, press down, shaken together, overflowing, right? So you're going to get an abundance when you give, right? You sow 2 or 3, 4 corn seed in the ground, but yet you reap a huge stalk with 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 ears of corn. And in those ears of corn are, I don't know, 200 each. So what do you get? Thousands of kernels of corn from those 2 or 3 kernels of corn. So it's a universal law.
It is.
So just know that you give, and then you eventually get, and be focused on giving, not focused on taking. And that would be those 2 things. You're okay, and focus on giving and serving others and being a go-giver, and things will be okay.
Yeah, I love that. What's coming to mind for me when you said that is basically our ego strives, right? It's the thing that tells us to strive and drive and push and do more and earn more and close more deals. But it's our vulnerability, our true like humanness that is the thing that says it's okay. You're okay. Yeah. I'm okay. Yeah. I mean, we're not trying to channel Stuart Smalley today, but but being able to say those words, you're enough, is a very, very powerful place to be. Because I know I've spent a large part of my life saying you're not enough, you're not doing enough, you're not earning enough. And it feels like shit when I do that to myself. I mean, I'm pretty much abusing myself. It hurts.
Yeah.
But just to be okay with where I'm at, with what I'm doing, with the money that I make, it's all good.
And
It's
by
such
golly, people like you.
yeah, by golly, they do. By golly, people like you, Steve. Sometimes people don't like me, but that's okay. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing what you went through in your career. I'm just so grateful because I know so many folks have had similar stories. And it doesn't matter if it's an normal business downturn, 2001 recession, 2008 recession, the 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 blip in the economic radar of of COVID.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's categorically a recession or not, but certainly in certain
Something.
sectors. Yeah, whatever the hell that was. But, so many people go through it and they suffer in silence. And so I'm just grateful that you shared the emotions of that time because they're real and
Yeah.
they can be paralyzing. And for you to come out the other side with the true definition of who you are makes the world a better place.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. It's been an honor to be able to share that with you.
Thank you, Steve. Wasn't it so kind of Steve to share this level of vulnerability with us today? I'm very, very grateful. I'd love to share with you the lessons that I'm taking away from our conversation. And I hope that you'll share yours too, wherever you're watching or listening in, so we can learn from you as well as from me today. So in thinking about this conversation, what strikes me is all these signs that came to Steve before he lost his job, right? A mentor saying, hey, sell your house. Hey, lessen your financial expenses. It was probably intuitive, but it was also probably very, very practical. And Steve took action and it came at just the right time. And, one of the things he said was like, oh, I didn't want to be in a basement apartment. And really what I heard was our ego never wants us to be in the basement apartment. But sometimes for very, very practical reasons, very practical financial reasons, we should have that basement apartment. And so when you're thinking about big life decisions, big purchases, just question how much your ego is at play here. How much of your ego wants you to have the bigger house, the nicer car, the nicer clothes, to show up with the perfect outfit, to make sure your nails are done perfectly at all time. If that's your ego talking, maybe you need to check it. And maybe you need to think about living more simply. You heard me talk about FU money. I believe all of us can have that FU money. You know what that stands for, but it also stands for freedom. Because when you have that savings in the bank, it creates a level of freedom in your life that can allow you to make pivots on your own terms, that can allow you to make job changes or significant life changes on your own terms because you have saved for it. And I hope you never need it, but have it in the bank as your security blanket, if you will. Huge proponent of that. The other thing that comes to mind for me, for Steve, and I know for any of you out there listening who've been in this situation, if our job title is our identity and we lose our job, then we feel like we lose our identity. It's really an amazing time to find who you really are underneath, because chances are those values that have been driving you have been there all along. You have just been putting them in this container of your job. And when that container is no longer there, you'll lose sight of who you are. And for Steve, he's disciplined. He has a bias for action. He's creative. He's determined. He never quits. And he's found very creative ways to work around limitations he didn't even know he had, which I just love that for him. But do you know what your values are? Do you know what drives you when no one else is around? It's probably a little cliche, but what would you do if you won the lottery and you didn't have to work? The answer is not truly nothing. That's not possible. You would get super bored. There's not enough internet or TV to last a lifetime for that stuff. But the answer of what you would do when no one was watching, no one was paying you, that's probably closer to who you are and who you're meant to be. How have you taken the time to truly explore that? And the situation where he was fired, Steve, I think at one point used the word propelled. Situations like this in our adulting, in our adulthood, can propel us to where we need to be. I've often said when happens, let the shift happen, because that's exactly what the universe, the Holy Spirit, the big man upstairs, insert your language of choice there for these factors at play that are helping guide us to where we're supposed to be while we're on this planet. Sometimes the Holy Spirit, the universe, puts these things in motion because we're not doing the right thing to put our life in motion. Steve mentioned that he was, before 9/11, before he got fired, he was comfortable. He was also complacent. And so that's actually the opposite end of burnout. So one form of burnout is when we work so hard, we kind of work ourselves into the ground. The opposite end of burnout, but it's still just as valid as burnout, is being so bored that you lack enthusiasm, you lack energy, you lack critical thinking because you're just bored. So I have a hunch Steve was on his way to there, and I have a hunch you've been there myself. So don't underestimate burnout that's caused by boredom. You need to take action. You need to reflect on what you truly do want, just as much as you would as if you were burnout and angry and frustrated and mentally frazzled and physically frazzled. You need to deal with it then, but also deal with it on the opposite kind of burnout. You don't deserve to live a life in either end of the burnout spectrum there. And, he has learned along the way to reveal his vulnerabilities, that he is okay. And that resonates with me. And I'm guessing you need to hear that too, that you are enough. And I know, at my heart, I'm a life coach. So I'm going to say stuff like this. You are enough. You are okay. Enough is sometimes just enough. This more and more hustle culture that we have in America is unsustainable mentally, physically, probably financially. I'm not an economic person, or an economist, I should say. But a lot of this is really unsustainable for us as human beings in a body. And so please, please, please be willing to reveal your vulnerabilities, reflect on what you do want to happen in life, make it happen, be okay with who you are. And that's what will allow you to truly connect and be in relationship with other people. All right, my friend. Now, if you got value from this episode, would you please share it with another ambitious learner and leader just like you who maybe needs to hear this message too today? I would be very, very grateful, and it will help us find even more pro troublemakers on this planet. Now, let's get off this media stuff and get back to the really impactful work that will help you create your legacy, help you work more effectively with other people, and do some really good work today. I'll see you soon, my friend.